On the top, we have Bitcoin from March 23 through October of 23. And on the bottom, Bitcoin from November of 2024 through present day. Both these charts are on the daily chart. And history doesn't repeat itself, but boy, oh boy, does it rhyme. So when I'm calling this tariff event, I think sentimentally, it has the exact same structure and feeling as the war in Israel. And this was like World War III was being crammed down our throat. So I decided to look at the actual structure. Is there similarities? And I would argue yes. So you have a peak right here, and then you have a peak during the tariff peak, right? And then you have a peak that goes higher than the peak over here. You have a peak that goes higher than the peak over here. Okay, so check, check. Then you have this little creek down, and then boom, selling climax, and then boom, selling climax. How do we know it was a selling climax? Well, when we look on the war in Israel on the RSI, this flashed all the way in the red, and even though this point right here goes lower than this point right here, the RSI was higher. And also, this is textbook structure for a bottoming structure or Wyckoff accumulation. So you're selling climax, the climax of selling, and then you have a secondary test which goes lower than the selling climax, even though the selling climax is technically the bottom. So that's what we had right here. You're selling climax, and we know because it flashes red on the RSI, and then you get a lower point even though the RSI is higher. So right here, selling climax, and then your secondary test goes lower even though the RSI is higher. Selling climax, we know because it flashes red on the RSI, even though your secondary test goes lower than the selling climax. Okay, check, check. All right, so let's zoom in just a little bit and really examine this structure. So I'm calling this the selling climax right here of Wyckoff, and then this is your secondary test. This would make this your automatic reaction. Selling climax, automatic reaction, secondary test. Selling climax, automatic reaction, secondary test. Okay, selling climax, again, automatic reaction, secondary test goes lower. Okay, check, check, check. And then you get a higher low out of here. And then, excuse me, a higher high and then a higher low. A higher high and then a higher low. Right here is where I think that we are. If my theory is true, what we should be getting is a higher high and then one more higher low before a breakout. Let me know in the comments what you think. Follow me for more.